Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast Season 2, the show where I read the Tanakh and provide my own interpretations of what I think it all means. This week's episode falls on the 21st of Nissan. There is not a weekly Torah portion, rather this is the Passover special portion for the week, so you can check out last year's episode about Passover if you'd like to hear those portions. As for our reading today, we'll be continuing with the book of Samuel. That's chapter 25 through 27 in Shmuel 1, and we'll be going on from there, following up with the story of King David. Now, as always, I'd like to remind everybody I'm not a professional scholar, just somebody who wanted to study the scripture. If you'd like to follow along in English, I'm using Chabad.org for my translation, and I also want to encourage everybody to do your best as you are trying to follow the weekly narratives to stay in line with what's going on in the Hebrew calendar. Particularly with this week, as I mentioned, being part of Passover's observation. Next week, we will get back into our normal weekly portions. Now let's go ahead and jump on in with Shmuel 1, chapter 25, verse 1. And Samuel died, and all Israel gathered and lamented him, and they buried him in his house in Ramah. And David arose and went down to the desert of Paran. And there was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel. And the man was very great, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was, while shearing his sheep, in Carmel. And the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail, and the woman was of good sense and of beautiful form. But the man was hard and of evil deeds, and he was a Calebite. And David heard in the desert that Nabal was shearing his sheep. And David sent 10 youths, and David said to the youths, Go up to Carmel, and you shall come to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And you shall say, So shall you be living next year, and may peace be to you, and peace to your household, and peace to all that is yours. And now I have heard that they are shearing for you. Now your shepherds were with us. We did not disgrace them, neither was anything missing to them all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your youths, and they will tell you, and may the youths find favor in your eyes, for we have come on a festive day. Give now what your hand will find, for your servants and for your son David. And David's youths came and spoke to Nabal according to all these words, in David's name, and they rested. And Nabal answered David's servants and said, Who is David, and who is the son of Jesse? Nowadays there are many slaves who break away each one from his master. Now shall I take my bread and my water and my meal which I have cooked for my shearers, and shall I give them to people of whom I know not whence they are? And David's youths turned around to their way and returned, and came and told him according to all these words. And David said to his men, Gird each man his sword. And they girded each man his sword, and David too girded his sword. And they went up after David, about 400 men, and 200 stayed with the luggage. And one youth of the youths told Abigail, the wife of Nabal, saying, Behold, David sent messengers from the desert to greet our master, and he drove them away. And the men are very good to us, and we were not disgraced, nor was anything missing to us all the time we went with them, when we were in the field. They were a wall over us both day and night, all the time we were with them, pasturing the sheep. And now know and see what you will do, for the evil has been decided upon against our master and against all of his household, and he is such a base person that one cannot speak to him. And Abigail hastened, and she took 200 loaves, and 2 earthenware jugs of wine, and 5 prepared sheep, and 5 seah of flour, and roasted ears of grain, and 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and she placed them on the donkeys. And she said to her youths, Go on ahead of me. Behold, I am coming after you. And she did not tell her husband Nabal. And it was that she was riding on the donkey and coming down under the cover of the mountain, and behold, David and his men were coming down toward her, and she met them. And David said, Surely in vain have I watched all this fellow has in the desert, so that nothing was missing of all that is his, and he has returned me evil for good. So shall God do to David's enemies, and so shall he continue if I leave over all of that he has, by the morning light even one dog. And Abigail saw David, and she hastened and leaned off the donkey, and she fell on her face before David, and prostrated herself on the ground. And she fell at his feet, and said, In me alone, my lord, is the iniquity. Now let your handmaid speak into your ears, and hearken to the words of your handmaid. Let not my lord take heed of this base fellow of Nabal, for like his name, so he is. Nabal is his name, and ungratefulness is with him. And I, your handmaid, did not see my lord's youths whom you sent. And now, my lord, as the Lord lives, and by your life, I swear that the Lord has withheld you from coming to bloodshed, and from saving yourself with your hand. And now may your enemies and those who seek evil to my lord be as Nabal. And now this gift, which your handmaid has brought to my lord, shall be given to the youths who walk at my lord's feet. Forgive now your handmaid's transgression, for the Lord shall make for my lord a sure house, for my lord fights for the wars of the Lord, and let no evil be found in all your days in you. And a man has arisen to pursue you and to seek your soul, but my lord's soul shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord your God, while the soul of your enemies the Lord will sling it with the hollow of the sling. And it will be, when the Lord will do to my lord according to all the good which he spoke concerning you, and he will appoint you as ruler over Israel. Let this not be to you as a stumbling block, and a remorse of heart to my lord, that you have shed blood without cause, or that my lord has avenged himself. And when the Lord will do good to my lord, you shall remember your maidservant. And David said to Abigail, Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who has sent you towards me on this day. Blessed is your advice, and blessed be you, who have restrained me this day from coming into bloodshed, and from avenging myself with my own hand. And indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has restrained me from harming you, I swear that had you not hastened and come toward me, there would not have been left to Nabal until daybreak even one dog. And David took from her hand that which she had brought him. And he said to her, Go up in peace to your house. See that I have hearkened to your voice, and have shown you favor. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he had a feast in his house like the feast of the king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, and he was very drunk. And she did not tell him anything, less or more, until daybreak. And it was in the morning, when the wine had left Nabal, that his wife told him these things. And his heart died within him, and he became like stone. And it was just 10 days after that the Lord inflicted a stroke on Nabal, and he died. And David heard that Nabal had died, and he said, Blessed is the Lord, who has judged the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and restrained his bondsmen from evil, and returned Nabal's evil upon his own head. And David sent and spoke concerning Abigail to take her to him for a wife. And David's servants came to Abigail to Carmel, and spoke to her, saying, David has sent us to you to take you to him for a wife. And she arose, and prostrated herself upon her face to the ground, and said, Behold, your bondswoman is a slave to wash the feet of my lord's servants. And she hastened and mounted the donkey with her 5 maidens who went with her, and she went after David's messengers and became his wife. And David took Ahinoam from Jezreel, and they both became his wives. And Saul had given his daughter Michal, wife of David, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was from Galim. End of chapter 25. So a story here of something that had happened. First, Samuel has died. So the book is called Samuel. Well, the star of the book has died. So it says that all Israel gathered and lamented him. I mean, they just lost the one guy who could communicate with God so easily, Samuel the prophet, Shmuel. And so they gather and buried him in his home in Ramah. And it says David arose and went down to the desert of Paran. So in Maon, there was a man who owned things in Carmel. The man was named Nabal. Nabal had a great many things of wealth, and his sheep were being shorn in this area in Carmel. So what happens is he also has a wife named Abigail, who it says is very, very sensible and beautiful. But that the man, Nabal, was the opposite. He was basically a very tough guy, had a bad attitude, and he was an evil man. He was a son of Calebite. And so David hears that Nabal is shearing his sheep, and he sends 10 youths to go to Carmel and greet him, say, like, we come on behalf of David, and, so shall you be living next year. So in other words, bless him that he will continue to have good fortune next year. But we hear that you're shearing sheep, and your shepherds were with us. When they were with us, we did nothing to disgrace them, nor did they lose anything, right? So let him know that we took care of his people while they were with us, and we're asking whatever you're willing to give. It says what your hand will find for your servants and your son David. So basically, give what you can give. And Nabal basically says, David who? Son of Jesse? Who's Jesse? I don't know these people. Listen, we got plenty of slaves these days who run off from his mat. All right, I'm going to take my bread and my water, and I'm going to give it to this guy who I don't even know? I don't think so. So they go back, and David hears this news, and he's like, okay then, we're going to destroy everything he owns. We're going to go ahead, and since he acted so callously, we're going to destroy his entire household. We're going to leave him nothing by the morning. And Abigail, the wife, she gets a warning. One youth who had spoken to Nabal, he heard about what was going on. Or maybe it's one of the youths of the sheep shearers. Either way, one of the youths warns Abigail about this going down. And she just says, oh no, this is bad. This is very bad. We can't have that. So she gathers a wonderful offering of things. And, especially hearing that David and his men were like protectors to Nabal's flock, that can't be left alone. So she grabs 200 loaves of bread, 2 things of wine, 2 jugs, 5 sheep, 5 seah flour of roasted ears of grain, 100 clusters of raisins, 200 cakes of figs. She brings a full offering for David, and she says, go ahead and I'll follow you. Right, and so David is on the way with sword in hand and an army of 400 men to slaughter Nabal's household, basically. And instead, Abigail cuts him off and meets him there and presents herself and lowers herself to the ground and basically says, David, you will be great, and you fight you fight as the king's weapon, basically. You serve the king, or not the king, the Lord. You fight the Lord's wars, so you fight on behalf of God. And look at this. In me alone is the iniquity. So it's not Nabal. Nabal is as his name. He's just a wicked guy. But please, I did not know of what was going on. Please accept this offering. And most importantly, do not go and spill blood. Don't go and kill this man and do these horrible things, because it will put you into bloodshed, and that will be something that will bring you down. Don't let this be a stumbling block for you. So in other words, the stumbling block is a spiritual one. It will lower David's esteem in the eyes of heaven. And so she is preventing this. She's saying, instead, please forgive your handmaid's transgression, right? And the Lord shall make for my Lord, so for you, a sure house, because you fight the wars of God, and let no evil be found in you all your days. A man has risen to pursue you, but your soul shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord your God. So she blesses him. Rather than letting this come to pass, she blesses David and tells him that you're not going to have any sort of thing to look back on and have remorse over doing. I'm going to protect you in this moment. I'm stopping it from happening if you show mercy. And David is overwhelmed with wow, she speaks well. Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who has sent you toward me this day. So, he blesses her. Blessed is your advice. Blessed is you who restrained me from coming into bloodshed and avenging myself with my own hand. Right? And so it says, indeed as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has restrained me from harming you, I swear that had you not hastened and come toward me, I would have killed everything. So, really, thank you. And he took from her hand that which she brought him, so he accepts her offering, and he says, go up in peace to your house, see that I have hearkened to your voice, and have shown you favor. And so Abigail goes home, and what's Nabal doing? He's actually partying right now. He's having a feast. He's merry. And so this is even worse, because he turned away giving an offering, and the things that were given it seems like some of them were given in offering, not just as food, but also offerings to be made perhaps to the Lord. Now, we also remember the timing here. Samuel has just died. So this may also be part of what David is hoping to make an offering in relation to that too, since he just lost the guy who anointed him and gave him the blessings and so on. I don't know the specifics, but my point is this happened. Abigail stopped David from killing this guy Nabal's household and wiping out all he owns, and because of this, stopped David from falling into sin. So Abigail gets home. Nabal is basically partying, having a good old time. So she waits until he's no longer drunk and then tells him what happened. And Nabal is suddenly, it says that his heart died within him and he became like stone. So in other words, this news just completely crushed him, because now he understood, like, oh, I'm screwed. And it says that 10 days after that he had a stroke and he died. So David overhears this, and he basically says, blessed is the Lord who has judged the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and restrained his bondsman from evil, and returned Nabal's evil upon his own head. And then what he decides to do to conclude is he goes and he says, go get that woman Abigail. I want her as a wife. And so he marries the widow of Nabal and takes her for himself. And so she continues to be so very humble and says, Behold your bondswoman as a slave to wash the feet of my Lord's servants. She basically gives herself over, and she marries. It also says that he takes Ahinoam from Jezreel, and they both become his wives. As for Michal, the wife that he originally had, Saul's daughter, well, she's been given to Palti, the son of Laish, who is from Galim. So Saul has taken David's given wife, Michal, and married her off to someone else. Now we move on to chapter 26, verse 1, Book of Samuel 1. And the Ziphites came to Saul to Gibeah, saying, Is David not hiding in the hill of Hachilah before the desolate wasteland? And Saul arose and descended to the desert of Ziph. And with him were 3,000 picked men to seek David in the desert of Ziph. And Saul encamped in the hill of Hachilah, which is before the desolate wasteland, by the road. And David was staying in the desert, and it appeared to him that Saul had come after him to the desert. And David sent spies, and he learned that Saul had surely come. And David arose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay, and Abner, the son of Ner, the commander of his army. And Saul was lying within the barricade, and the people were encamped around him. And David spoke up and said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, the brother of Joab, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul to the camp? And Abishai said, I shall go down with you. And David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul was lying asleep within the barricade, with his spear thrust into the ground at his head, and Abner and the people were lying around him. And Abishai said to David, Today God has delivered your enemy into your hand. And now let me strike him now with the spear to the ground with one stroke, and I shall not repeat this to him. And David said to Abishai, Do not destroy him, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be accounted guiltless? And David said, As the Lord lives, but the Lord will smite him, or his day will come and he will die, or he will go down to war and perish. Far be it for me from the Lord to stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. And now take the spear which is at his head and the jug of water, and let us go away. And David took the spear and the jug of water from near Saul's head, and they went away. And no one saw, and no one knew, and no one awakened, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. And David crossed to the other side, and stood on the mountain peak from afar. The space between them was great. And David called to the people, and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, Will you not answer, Abner? And Abner answered and said, Who are you to have called to the king? And David said to Abner, Are you not a valiant man? And who is like you in Israel? And why did you not guard your lord the king? For one of the people came to destroy the king your lord. This thing which you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you are worthy of death, for you did not keep watch over your lord, over the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the jug of water which was at his head. And Saul recognized David's voice, and said, Is this your voice, my son David? And David said, It is my voice, my lord, O king. And he said, Why does my lord pursue his servant? For what have I done, and what evil is in my hand? And now let my lord the king hear his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, he will accept an offering. But if the sons of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me today from cleaving to the Lord's heritage, saying, Go worship other gods. And now let not my blood fall to the ground away from the face of the Lord, for the king of Israel has gone out to seek a flea as the partridge hunts in the mountains. And Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I shall harm you no more, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have acted foolishly, and I have erred exceedingly. And David answered and said, Behold the king's spear! Now let one of the youths come over and take it. And the Lord will repay every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered you today into my hand, and I would not stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. And behold, as your life was precious this day in my eyes, so shall my life be precious in the eyes of the Lord, and he shall save me from every distress. And Saul said to David, Blessed be you, my son David. You shall both do great things, and you shall prevail. And David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. End of chapter 26. So, once again, it seems Saul is back up to his trickery and pursuit of David. They tell him, Isn't David hiding in the hill of Hachilah before the desolate wasteland? And so he goes to the desert of Ziph, and they report to Saul. He goes and answers the report, And David finds out, like, okay, we need to confirm that Saul is actually here coming for me again. The spies confirm it, so David arises, and behold, he finds Saul laying there along with his general Abner, the commander of the army, right? So they're all within the barricade, and so he asks Ahimelech and Abishai, and he says, who's going to go with me down to Saul's camp? And Abishai says, I'll go with you. And so they get there, and it's nighttime. Saul and all his men are fast asleep behind their barricade, and his spear is thrust into the ground next to his head, right? And Abner is also there with him, along with all the others. They're all sleeping. So Abishai says to David, oh, look, God has given him into your hand. Let me go down there and kill him. And David says, no, you can't do that. That's God's anointed. We can't kill him. There's going to be consequences. And so David basically says, look, as the Lord lives, the Lord will smite him, his day will come, or he's going to go die in war. Either way, it's not going to be us. I'm not going to be the one to kill this guy. He's the Lord's anointed. I can't kill him. So instead, what we're going to do is you can take his spear and take the jug of water that's next to him. We're going to take those. And so they sneak off with the king's things, and the next day they call out, and he basically issues a challenge of Abner's merit. It's like he insults Abner's honor. He says, Abner, well, first the king, Abner is like, who are you that calls to the king? Who do you think you are? And he's like, let me ask you, aren't you supposed to be a valiant man? Then why weren't you protecting the king? Because behold, someone came to kill your king, but you failed. You did not protect him. And for that, you are worthy of death, because you did not watch over the Lord's anointed. Now look where his spear is. I have the king's spear and jug of water. So look at that. This is how badly you failed at your job. And Saul overhears this, and he says, is this your voice, my son David? And he confirms, yep, it's me. And he further asks Saul once again, why are you pursuing me? What have I done to you? What evil have I committed? So hear me. If the Lord has incited you against me, he will accept an offering. So in other words, he's basically telling him, if this is really justice, then God will accept an offering on behalf of it. But if the sons of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me today from cleaving to the Lord's heritage, saying, go worship other gods, right? But if the sons of men, basically. So he's saying, this isn't God who did this. This is the work of man. So he says, if the Lord has incited you against me, he will accept my offering. But if the sons of men have incited you against me, cursed be they, for they have driven me today from cleaving to the Lord's heritage, saying, go worship other gods. So now he says, let not my blood fall to the ground away from the face of the Lord. The king of Israel has gone out to seek a flea as a partridge hunts in the mountain. So he's basically once again saying, I'm nothing, and here you are wasting your time chasing me. And Saul once again says, I've sinned. Behold, I'm in the wrong. Now David says, this is the king's spear. Send one of the youths to come and take it, and that'll be that. And so he also adds, the Lord will repay every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. The Lord delivered you today into my hand. I would not stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. So in other words, he's basically saying he's going to bless me or take care of me because I did the right thing here. And so because I held your life precious in my eyes, so shall my life be precious in the eyes of the Lord, and he will save me from every distress. And Saul says to David, blessed be you, my son David. You shall both do great things, and you shall prevail. Now, what's really significant about this is the fact that, one, obviously Saul once again has turned to go and kill David. The question is, why? Did he not have an experience about this already where they realized this is the wrong move? So it could be that he's still being haunted by the Spirit of God that's been, the evil spirit that's pushing him. It could be that he basically only agreed to let David go because in that moment he was vulnerable. Or it could be that he changed his mind. It happens, right? We see it with the Egyptian Pharaoh story. The king can change his mind and decide, I'm going to go pursue David for evil once again. Either way, at the end, he acknowledges separately, you will do great things and you'll prevail. Previously, he told him that you're going to be the king, right? You will someday be king. So essentially, what he has now done is, just like with Balak and Balaam, where Balaam ended up blessing Israel, the king has gone ahead and now blessed David by saying, once again, you're going to be successful. So before he blessed him one way, now he's saying this, he blesses him a second way. And in doing this, by doing the right thing, David has secured good karma in heaven, essentially. That's the easiest way to describe it. So that's how things go. David walks away from this once again alive and successful because God delivered him, and also he showed God that he's not going to lose faith and take advantage of the situation. Like, he was given kind of the temptation now, a second chance to kill Saul, and once again he has not done so. And by doing so, he has prevented the blood being on his hands. Very, very strategic and smart choice. Now, he can't kill the king. That's just simple as that. The king is anointed, and so to do so, even though the king is in the wrong, he can't do it because you can't unmake that anointment. Anyhow, moving on to the final chapter for today, chapter 27, verse 1 of Book of Samuel 1. And David said to himself, "Now I shall perish one day in the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should escape to the land of the Philistines. And Saul will despair of me to seek me any more in all the border of Israel, and I shall escape from his hand." And David arose, and he and the 600 men who were with him crossed over to Achish, the son of Mawach, the king of Gath. And David dwelt with Achish in Gath, he and his men, each man and his household, David and his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelitess. And it was told to Saul that David had fled to Gath, and he did not continue to search for him. And David said to Achish, "Now if I have found favor in your eyes, let them give me a place in one of the country towns, and I shall dwell there. For why should your servant dwell in the royal city with you?" And Achish gave him Ziklag on that day. Therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah until this day. And the number of days which David dwelt in the field of the Philistines was some days and 4 months. And David and his men would go up and raid the Geshurites and the Gizrites and the Amalekites, for those tribes were in the inhabitants of the land, who were of old, as you go to Shur, even to the land of Egypt. And David would smite the inhabitants of the land, and leave neither man nor woman alive, and he would take sheep and cattle and donkeys and camels and clothing, and return and come to Achish. And Achish would say, "Where did you raid today?" And David would say, "Against the south of Judah, and against the south of the Jerahmeelites, and against the south of the Kenites." And David would leave alive neither man nor woman to bring to Gath, saying, lest they tell about us, saying, "So has David done, and so is his manner all the days which he has dwelt in the field of the Philistines." And Achish believed David, saying, "He has greatly abhorred his people Israel, and he will be a bondsman to me forever." End of chapter 27. So to summarize once again, David at the beginning here, he basically says, look, I'm going to die at Saul's hands at one point, so it's better that I just leave Israel altogether and I go to the land of the Philistines, because Saul, he's not going to want to pursue me there. So that'll be the end of that. If I'm not in Israel, he's going to leave me alone. And so he goes there with his 600 men, and they move into Achish's territory. So Achish is the son of Maok, the king of Gath. So Achish is he's a prince, right? He's one of the princes of the Philistines. And interestingly, this is where the great Goliath comes from as well. So it says, and David dwelled with Achish in Gath, he and his men and his household. So it says David and his 2 wives as well. And Saul finds out that he's fled to Gath, and sure enough, he says, okay, well, I'm giving up on hunting David then. And David says to Achish, if I found favor in your eyes, let me have a place in one of the country towns, and I'll live there, because why should I live in your royal city? Like, I'm just your servant. And so Achish gives him the town of Ziklag, and that area, it says, remains in the hands of the kings of Judah in time immemorial. And so it says that he was there basically for some days and 4 months. So he's not there very long. But what would happen is he would go on these raiding parties, right? So he would raid the Geshurites, the Gizrites, and the Amalekites. So these are non-Israelite people that dwelled in the land, and they were always there, right? So we remember hearing about them in the earlier stories, such as when the Israelites were coming in during Joshua and the end of the Torah. But anyway, they're all around that area. And so what happens is David will go there, and they will basically smite the people and leave nothing behind of the humans, but they would take the booty. So they take the cattle, the sheep, the donkeys, and the camels, and so on, and clothing, and they would bring it to Achish. And Achish would say, where did you go raiding this time? And what do you have for me, basically? And David would say, I went against the south of Judah, the south of the Jerahmeelites, and the south of the Kenites. And so in doing so, he's not being dishonest, but what this really sounds like is that David is basically just some raider who's not faithful to Israel, when in fact he's only killing specific people that are not his allies, or that are, the inhabitants of the land that were supposed to be driven out. So this is how he is strategically, he's basically being a pirate bandit, but he's only targeting specific cultures. And so in doing so, he brings back these prizes. And when he tells the prince, what did you raid today, David? He tells him, oh, I was south of Judah, and south of Jerahmeelites, and south of the Kenites. And so he hears this. He doesn't realize he's talking about people that are not friendly to Israel or necessarily aligned with Israel, but especially like Amalek is a perfect example. And so the reason he kills all the men and the women is that he doesn't want them to basically report to the Philistines who he's killing. As long as he shows up with treasure, the prince is content. And so he hears about it, and the prince is just saying, look at all these things David's doing. He says, he has greatly abhorred his people Israel, and he will be to me a bondsman forever. So he thinks that David is now loyal to him, because for whatever reason, he has fled to the Philistines. So yes, clearly David is now going to be his servant. And that's great, because he's going to keep bringing me offerings all the time. This was a great deal. So from the prince's perspective, he knows nothing about the details. He just knows that David keeps successfully raiding the land of Israel and coming back with great treasures, and that is a good thing. It's probably also well known that this is the same guy who killed Goliath. So, this David fellow is worth keeping around. But it's interesting that David has had to basically consort with the neighboring peoples rather than deal within Israel because of what Saul is doing. He's a king to be on the run. Nevertheless, that is the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. It's very interesting to see the levels of sort of duplicity that David will engage in here and there, as well as strategic information and spying and so on. You have to ask yourself how much of this is like, they say all's fair in love and war. How much of it is acceptable? What is good? What is bad? The big thing with Abigail, I think, stuck out today. The fact that he took her as a wife after the husband died. He's like, hey, you know what? I'll take that woman. She's a good woman. So, in the time period, her being a widow would probably not be great for her. So now she's married to the future king. And, we've also got the story of Saul once again on the attack. So when will it end? When will it end? David has passed the test once again. And finally, this story of how he is now basically going to hang out with the people of Philistine, the enemy. But that's the best option for him right now. And, of course, also Samuel dying in this episode is quite significant, but it is one chapter of the many travails. It's also interesting that Samuel's death came before Saul went off, because it's interesting, when does Samuel die, right? He dies with the previous story regarding Nabal. And then the next episode has now Saul going after David again. So it's interesting that the prophet of God is no longer among Israel, and Saul is back on his shenanigans. But nevertheless, tune in next time. We'll be continuing the story of David and the others in the book of Samuel. This has been Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast Season 2 saying thank you for listening. I hope you'll tune in next time. And until then, as always, I leave you with Baruch Hashem.